Malicious Compliance, Episode Number 1. I shut down the whole organization for a week. I work at a very large nonprofit community center. We run a lot of services: a children's daycare, an open college, physiotherapy for seniors, and people with disabilities. We also have 6 large apartment buildings for senior citizens spread across the city, programs for immigrants and the unemployed, plus a cafeteria and a restaurant. It is a big operation. I genuinely like this job, and over the years I moved up quickly. I started as basic IT support, and for a long time I was the only IT person in the entire organization. When I began, we had around 80 employees, including the teachers at our open college, and over time we grew to more than 200. It was a calm, non-toxic workplace where people mostly just did their jobs and treated each other with respect. The catch was that anything involving ones and zeros was on my shoulders, so I could not realistically work the same schedule as everyone else. I had fully flexible hours. I worked when it made the most sense to keep systems running smoothly. I was salaried, paid once a month, not hourly. The executive director approved this arrangement because it allowed me to maintain the organization's IT infrastructure with almost no downtime. I came and went when it was best for the work, not the clock. That model worked brilliantly for about 12 years. Everyone was happy, and I was respected because I did not just get things done, I did it without causing downtime. If someone's workstation failed, the disruption was usually under an hour because I always kept spare machines ready for quick swaps. I was also on call 24/7, so if something truly critical happened, I would come in even during vacation when I could. In practice, I handled major maintenance when the office was not operating. I worked nights and weekends, so nobody had to deal with outages during business hours. At that stage, we had a serious server environment: 8 servers dedicated to Microsoft systems, 4 Linux servers, and several BSD machines for the open college. My maintenance routine was split into small tasks after hours, larger updates that ran after hours into the night, and the biggest jobs that sometimes meant spending an entire weekend at the office. Because we did not officially have overtime, we had a simple arrangement. If I worked more than 8 hours, I took the time back as paid leave the next day. If I stayed 2 or 3 hours late on Monday for maintenance, I came in 2 or 3 hours later on Tuesday. If it was a really heavy job, I took the entire next day off. I always informed the organization ahead of time. Maintenance was coming, and I would be taking a certain amount of leave the following day. No one had a problem with this. Everything ran normally until we hired a new project manager. She was a middle-aged woman who had spent years in corporate environments, and she brought that mindset with her. Our relaxed nonprofit culture shocked her. She started complaining about a lot of things, but one issue kept coming back again and again: my work hours. To this day, I do not understand how she managed to push the director around so effectively when, on paper, she was only a project manager. I was already the systems administrator responsible for the entire infrastructure, and we had an arrangement that had worked for years. But after a few conversations, the pressure began. Not long after, a major maintenance window came up. We needed to update accounting, and there were a few changes on the open college side as well. Like always, I emailed the whole organization. Updates would start in the evening and finish before morning, and I would not be in the office the next day. I also included the usual line: call or email if anything goes wrong. I never gave time estimates because in IT there is always a chance something unexpected happens. That evening, once everyone had left, I waited until the last person logged out and started working. It was routine: several updates, plus the specific database conversion that always comes with accounting and payroll updates. It takes time, but typically around 6 hours. When I finished, I tested everything, confirmed it was stable, and went home. The next morning, I woke up calmly, made coffee, and enjoyed my day off. Then, my work phone rang. The project manager was clearly upset and insisted I come to the office immediately. I said I would be there in about 15 minutes because I lived nearby. On the way, I tried to figure out what could have gone wrong overnight. It did not add up. If accounting was broken, the accountant would call. If it was the open college, the front office would call. Still, in IT, you do not ignore an urgent call, so I went in. I walked straight to her office, and that is when I found out what the emergency was. Her printer was out of toner, and she demanded a replacement right away. For a second, I honestly thought she was joking. The toner was on the first floor storage shelf, and a week earlier, every new employee had been told the policy. Everyone handles their own desktop printers. You add paper yourself, and you change your own toner. It is a simple task, and we kept it that way so IT would not be dragged away from critical work over something that takes 60 seconds. She said she was not going to do it and that it was my job. Our internal policy existed for a reason, but I did not argue that day. I went to storage, grabbed the toner, came back, replaced it, and left. For a short while, things were quiet, and I assumed the issue would die there. It did not. After the next few maintenance cycles, she called an administrative meeting. In the room were me, our new payroll clerk who also handled HR, the director, the office manager, and the project manager. From the start, it was obvious what the meeting was about: my hours. She accused me of taking leave whenever I want and said everyone in the organization should follow the same rules. I explained that while general rules may apply to everyone, IT scheduling is different. She claimed I was at home when people had computer problems, and I told her people call me, and almost everything gets solved immediately over the phone. She insisted home is not a workplace, and I reminded her that I worked nights and weekends specifically to prevent downtime during business hours, then took time off under the agreement we had had for years. Then she said all work should be done during normal office hours and questioned why I worked nights at all. I told her the answer was simple: because no one wants downtime while the organization is operating. And at that time, downtime mattered. We had around 120 employees, and at least 80 used computers every day. Physiotherapists wrote mandatory reports in the system. Daycare staff used computers daily to communicate with parents. Plans, schedules, documents, printing, everything depended on the network. She dismissed that and insisted I should work office hours, like everyone else. I looked to the director, expecting common sense. Instead, the director surprised me. He said he had been discussing it with her, and our old agreement was no longer valid. From now on, I had to do all my work during office hours because people do not like that you can take paid leave. I asked directly if he was sure, really sure, that this applied to everything, including servers and network maintenance. I asked if we could put the new rules in writing, the same way we had documented the flexible hours arrangement in the first place. He said yes and told me to come by that evening because he would have the document ready. That evening, we signed the new agreement. It was clear. I worked from 8:15 to 15:30, and all work had to be done within those hours. As I read through it, I noticed two important omissions. There was nothing about overtime and nothing about taking time back. There was also no rule about how much notice I had to give the staff before maintenance, only that maintenance must happen during office hours. I mentioned that the agreement did not say how far in advance I needed to notify everyone. The director shrugged and told me to just email people in the morning if I planned maintenance that day. I said, okay. And then I waited. For a few weeks, I kept things gentle, small maintenance tasks during the day, usually around lunch, keeping downtime to 1 or 2 hours. I was not trying to sabotage anyone's day, but I also knew a bigger update was coming eventually, one of those jobs that normally required nights, and sometimes an entire weekend in the office. This time, though, I was restricted to 8:15 to 15:30. No nights, no weekends, no overtime. That was the signed agreement. Eventually, the moment arrived. Massive updates to accounting and payroll. Normally, that kind of work meant an entire weekend at the office, sometimes even sleeping there to keep everything running and to finish before Monday. For a moment, I considered warning the director that the new agreement would hit the entire organization hard. In the end, I decided not to. I would do exactly what they had asked, exactly how they had written it. That morning, I arrived on time and emailed the entire organization that we would have maintenance that day affecting core infrastructure, including servers and routers, and that there was a critical financial software update involved. I said I would start at 11 as usual and thanked everyone for their understanding. I did not provide an estimate because I never do, and especially not on updates that large. At 11 o'clock I started. First, I pushed everyone off the network. I had a script, so it took seconds. Then, I launched operating system updates across the servers, one by one, and went to make coffee. The effect was immediate. People lost access to the file server, print server, and databases. Many services stopped working. Even the photocopier became useless because it required Active Directory login with an RFID card. Workstations still turned on, but our policy prohibited saving data locally, so without file servers, most real work stopped. Internet access also slowed dramatically because every server was pulling updates, and I made sure our Linux and Unix machines pulled everything available as well. My phone started ringing almost immediately. I answered calmly and repeated the same message. Yes, this is major maintenance. I sent the email this morning, and no, I cannot give an exact time frame. At one point, I said it could take all day, and with updates like this, sometimes longer. By noon, people came back from lunch and the network was still down. Around 1 o'clock, the calls increased, and some people came in person because they could not get through by phone. I explained that on large updates, the time is unpredictable. I said it should not take more than a day or two. That is when the office atmosphere changed completely. People moved around like a shaken beehive. I got demands to stop the process because they needed to work. I kept my response consistent. Once a process like this is in motion, you cannot safely cancel it halfway through. My job was to finish it properly. Even the director came to my office. He was angry at first, then visibly confused. And that is when I explained very plainly what was happening. This is what maintenance looks like when it must be performed only during office hours, without evenings or weekends. I was working strictly inside the schedule we had signed, 8:15 to 15:30, without overtime. I was not creating a problem. I was following the written agreement exactly. That day, I monitored the updates, reviewed documentation, and kept an eye on the systems. When 15:30 arrived, I went home. I saw people sitting at their desks watching me, clearly confused, but my working day was over under the new rules. The next morning, I came back and continued. A lot of servers were finished, especially the Linux and Unix ones, but the Windows servers needed restarts and verification. I could have rebooted them all at once, but I worked methodically. Reboot one, log in, confirm services are stable, verify the update status, document it, then move to the next. After each server, I wrote a detailed maintenance report because procedures required it, even if no one read it. Time disappeared quickly. When it got close to 14, I took lunch. I returned after 15 and started planning the next step because financial software updates still remained, and I wanted a checklist to ensure everything went smoothly. I did not finish the plan before 15:30, so I ended my day and went home again. Yes, by then it was Thursday, and I had started on Tuesday. On Thursday, I handled the financial system updates. I followed the supplier's recommended approach, install updates one by one using a checklist. Then I started the database conversion process, which always takes a long time. While it ran, I handled smaller server-side updates, but I kept everything strict and documented, because during business hours, you do not rush critical systems and hope for the best. When 15:30 came, I left again because that was the agreement. By Friday, the consequences were impossible to ignore. Since Tuesday at 11 o'clock, the organization had been operating in a strange state. People came to work, but they could not do normal work. They cleaned desks, sorted paper archives, did whatever tasks did not require the network, drank coffee, and waited. Internet access had returned earlier, but it did not solve the core problem. The key systems lived on the servers. I genuinely felt bad for the physiotherapists who had to take notes on paper and then later transfer everything into the system. The cafeteria and restaurant were fine because I intentionally did not touch the cash register systems. I wanted at least one part of the building to operate normally. Friday morning, I received confirmation that the database conversion completed successfully. Now I could bring services back online. I did it step by step, verifying each service before moving on. I did not rush. I took my scheduled breaks, I took a full lunch, and I documented everything. In the afternoon, right on time, I emailed the entire organization that maintenance was complete and everyone could log back in to regain access to the network and shared resources. I added that the next major maintenance window would likely be in a few months. That week, the director, the office manager, accounting, and payroll had spent most of their time at home or away from the office, because without the systems, much of their work was limited anyway. The project manager was furious at first, but she backed off when I explained that if I had to attend meetings with every department to discuss downtime, downtime would only last longer because I would be explaining instead of fixing. The following week, we held another administrative meeting. The tone was completely different. Everyone now understood what maintenance during office hours only actually meant in an organization that depends on IT. My previous arrangement was reinstated, flexible hours plus time off in exchange for after-hours work, and this time it was written clearly into an agreement. After that, no one ever complained about me taking paid time off for overtime again, because everyone had seen what the alternative looked like. I also was not worried about being fired. In my country, it is very difficult to terminate an employee without solid grounds, and with written agreements plus a contract that clearly defined my responsibilities, there was no realistic case against me. In the end, everything returned to normal. Within a few weeks, people were working smoothly again, and downtime virtually disappeared because I could once again do major maintenance after hours when it did not freeze the whole organization. Update: the project manager, who was the villain of this story, calmed down a lot after that week. For the rest of her career, she did not try to force rules like that again. Over time, our working relationship became normal, and I even helped her privately when she needed support with her home computer, printer, and Wi-Fi. A few years later, she retired, apologized for what happened, and took responsibility for it. We did have a few longer downtimes after that, but those were hardware failures. When a server truly dies, you cannot always replace it within an hour. Still, with virtualization and cheaper hardware today, I am far better prepared for those situations than I was back then. How my friend got paid to find creative ways to sleep for 19 months. I have a very good friend who, through Malicious Compliance, ended up getting paid for doing almost nothing for 19 months. It was a government job, which probably will not surprise anyone. She and her co-worker worked in a state office responsible for tracking plague cases in prairie dog colonies. During the summer, they were extremely busy, trapping animals, testing them, and filing reports. Once winter came around, however, the prairie dogs went into hibernation and the work simply stopped. That first autumn, they emailed their supervisor to say there was nothing left to do for the season. The response they received was that they should stand by for reassignment. So they did, for months. They did not want to risk being accused of collecting a paycheck without showing up, so at first they made a real effort to look productive. They very slowly organized storage areas, cleaned the office multiple times, sorted paperwork, and did anything that could reasonably pass as work. When even those tasks ran out, they started sleeping, doing schoolwork, solving Sudoku puzzles, and filling the time however they could. At the beginning, they slept in shifts so that someone was always present in case anyone came by to check on them. Once it became obvious that no one ever did, they stopped worrying about it. By the following summer, when the prairie dogs came out of hibernation and my friend thought their actual work might finally resume, the entire office, every employee in every department, received an email from someone high up. The message said that their specific department had been cut. No one really knew whether the funding had been pulled, whether all the necessary data had already been collected the previous summer, or whether the project had simply stopped being important to anyone. Either way, the State Department in charge of wildlife management had quietly eliminated the program. The email said nothing about their employment status, so my friend and her co-worker continued to come into work and continued to have nothing to do. Later, she told me about the things they did to pass the time. They made massive chains out of rubber bands, tied 2 office chairs together facing each other so they could sleep on the seats. She is about 152 centimeters tall, so she fit reasonably well. They built a kind of nest under a desk and sometimes pulled a large copy machine out of its cabinet and slept inside it. They made sure security saw them periodically throughout the day. They were also visible on cameras. Anyone in a supervisory role who had been paying attention would have noticed something was off, but no one ever took the time. They avoided people from other departments out of fear that someone might report them and generally kept to themselves. In truth, they rarely interacted with other employees even before all of this. Eventually, my friend ran into her former supervisor at an event. The supervisor asked where she had found new work. My friend did not lie and said she was still working there. When asked where exactly, the answer was simple: right where they had been left. She later told me that the look on the woman's face when she finally put the pieces together and realized what had been happening was priceless. The very next morning, before they even arrived at the office, my friend and her coworker were let go by email. Because they had technically been employed there long enough, 2 years was apparently the threshold, they both received a small severance package. They were allowed to keep all of the pay they had received because they had proof that they informed their supervisor they had no work and that she acknowledged it. They continued to show up every day. They did exactly what they were told, and it was never their responsibility to make sure work existed for them. On top of that, both of them technically qualified for unemployment benefits. Neither of them ever used the unemployment. They both had a strong feeling the situation could end at any moment, so they already had new jobs lined up. Edit. During later conversations, my friend added a few more details about how they spent their time while standing by. One autumn, she and her coworker decorated their shared sleeping hideout, a walk-in storage closet, with miniature Halloween decorations and reenacted scenes from Hocus Pocus. She also spent a huge amount of time editing Wikipedia articles for grammar. She learned how to knit and then learned that she did not actually enjoy knitting. Her coworker downloaded plans from the internet for a personal flying device, something like a jetpack, and tried to build a model of it using office supplies at a 1:16 scale. They knew it would never fly. They just wanted to see if they could build the structure. During the Christmas season, they wrote entirely new songs about how bored they were. In total, they completed 14 songs and recorded them on a small cassette recorder that she still has. At the same time, her coworker was attending evening classes and did his homework during the day while at work. By the time they were finally let go, he was just short of finishing school. He did complete it, went almost directly into a job, and a few years later became a real estate attorney. They also joked that they invented Uber and Lyft because they worked out a detailed plan for a non-taxi ride service that would be ordered over the internet. This was before smartphones were common. My friend also wrote letters to imprisoned serial offenders, telling them how disappointed she was in them. She never received a response. A few people later asked what she does now. After that job, she received excellent references, went on to work at the city zoo, earned certification in wildlife rehabilitation, and now works as a public outreach coordinator for a large cat sanctuary. As she puts it, she definitely does not miss either working with plague-ridden prairie dogs or being bored out of her mind for months on end. Thanks for staying until the end. If you have your own malicious compliance story, leave it in the comments. See you next time.